this day goes back to the 1850s since we started recording this in this country. It's based on the work by Fred Harrison. There's a couple other great books. This is one I pulled out in my drawer here before the recording today. It's called The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. And in it, Phil Anderson tracks these cycles. And if you average them out, some may think it's a typo when it says 18.6, but that is the average. And if you break that down, you can look at, economists and you hear 7-year cycles, 10-year cycles, and you look at that and you're like, well, does that really fit into this? And actually it does usually, because that 18.6 year cycle is really 2 7-year cycles.
So let's dive right into the topic at hand, Chris, which is where are we in this 18.6 year real estate cycle? Chris, Let's start that. Where do you think, where are we? Where should we start with this?
We are in the best part of the cycle in terms of where real estate is accelerating. And that may surprise some people, especially when you look back and you say, wait a minute, Chris, like interest rates are high and we just had this huge run up and we got through COVID. Like how does this make any sense? But this day goes back to the 1850s since we started recording this in this country. It's based on the work by Fred Harrison. There's a couple other great books. This is one I pulled out in my drawer here before the recording today. It's called The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. And in it, Phil Anderson tracks these cycles. And if you average them out, some may think it's a typo when it says 18.6, but that is the average. And if you break that down, you can look at, economists and you hear 7-year cycles, 10-year cycles, and you look at that and you're like, well, does that really fit into this? And actually it does usually, because that 18.6 year cycle is really 2 7-year cycles separated by a mid-cycle slowdown, which it happened during 9/11. It happened during COVID. Some people may say this is crazy. I didn't predict COVID, but I was talking about this in late 2019, how we were setting up for this mid-cycle slowdown. Lo and behold, COVID happened. I got really interested in like what was going on economically with COVID and how that worked out. And then lo and behold, what happened? The government stimulated the economy. Real estate took off like it always does in the second half of the cycle, which is another 7-year cycle. So if you track that back, okay, where are we? We're about halfway through that 7-year cycle now. And this is when things really pick up. So I'm kind of curious because I'm like, how is this going to happen? How are we going to continue this tear of real estate? So I'm really watching closely the political landscape, interest rates. Are interest rates going to pull back? Are we going to see a lot more infrastructure spending that we see now? But we're smack in the middle, second 7-year cycle, right before what is typically a 4-year slowdown.
Okay, so based upon the data that you've studied with the guy named Fred Harrison, I think you said Fred Harris, you're saying that he says there's these 2 windows, 2 7-year cycles, when there's typically a slowdown between the two. And so obviously the first one happened when 9/11 was after that. And then the second one was COVID. I think I kind of caught that. Well,
yeah, so that was, yeah. So those were the 2 mid cycles. So let's back it up. Let's back it up, Brett. So if you're listening, 2012 was the beginning of the current cycle we're in. So that was the end of that 4-year down period from 2008 to 2012. So we started up 7 years up into 2019, mid-cycle slowdown, 2020, 7 more years up, 26, 27, and then 4 more years. So if you track back to 2020, right, which was the mid-cycle slowdown, you go forward about 7 years, we're looking at, we're entering 2024, we're right in the middle of that second 7-year upcycle.
Okay. Wow. And so the thought would be, you said before I cut you off, there's going to be a 4-year what? What was that next thing?
Yeah. So typically what we see is 7-year cycle, mid-cycle slowdown. That's probably where that 0.6 years comes in there if you average it all out. 7-year, mid-cycle slowdown, 7-year, that's 14 and a half years, and then 4 years after that. So if we add 7 plus 7 to 2012, we're looking at 2026, 2027 before we enter that 4-year down cycle typically.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So if that's all true, what do we start to do about this, Chris, and or anything else to add to where we're at in this cycle?
All right. So first off, there's certain things that you can do during different parts of the cycle. So let me rewind real quickly. So as you come out of the down cycle, we started building spec homes. You can buy land cheap. It's cheap to build. There's high margins for development early on in the cycle. As you get later on in the cycle, rents rise. It makes a lot of sense to buy income producing properties, commercial real estate. Like we started buying multifamily. multifamily, mobile home parks, self-storage, those sorts of properties. As rents rise, net operating income rises, those prices get higher. And all of this, if you really kind of peel it back and say, well, what is this all built on? It's all built on credit creation around the price of land. So as land prices go up, there's more credit, there's more money floating around in the system, and that enables the ability for this kind of virtuous cycle to continue until we get overheated. So at this part in the cycle, we typically see interest rates rise. You can go back 18 years in the early 2000s. You can go back before that. You can go back into the 70s and see the high interest rates then. And, we can talk about why that is with demographics and why they're different at different points in time, because basically interest rates are the price of money. So supply of money, demand of money, high demand, high interest rates, if that makes sense. So what do you do as part of the cycle when real estate prices are high and interest rates are high? I like operating real estate, which I think you and I spoke about last time I was on the show. Car washes, mobile home parks, senior housing facilities, short-term rentals. What do all these things have in common? They have the ability to have rent as well as operating profit, which allows you to continue to have a profitable business built around real estate, even during times of high interest rates, if that makes sense.